Okay, and we're live. Hi, everyone. This is Althea, and this is our May community call. And I'm Liz. I'll be moderating today. I work with Althea. This is Althea, and this is our May community call. Sorry. And I'm Liz. I'll be moderating. Sorry about the feedback. That was my other video starting. I'm here with the Althea team, Deborah, our COO, Jehan, our CEO, and Justin, our CFO. And we're going to be talking about the process for setting up an Althea neighborhood, an Althea network in your community and neighborhood, and answering all of your questions. So feel free to pop your questions in the chat. You can tweet us as well. And yeah, and we're going to get started. So I'm going to let the Althea team introduce themselves and give you an update on what we've been working on. Who wants to go first? How about I pick Deborah?
Okay, awesome. Yeah, we've got some really exciting things. We have actually launched, I think now 6 of our Althea Hoods program. And what that is local organizers have selected, an area in their communities where they think they can build out a deployment. And then we're supporting them with a website, marketing materials, and just some help logistically with the build out as well too. So they're going into their communities and putting up flyers, and they have Facebook pages and social media, and trying to get some of these signups and pre-commitments ahead of time. And then once they reach a certain threshold, then they'll build out to the network itself to their community. So we have one in the Hoodoo area in Saskatchewan, Canada. We have one in the Hilltop area of Tacoma, Washington, one in Oregon again in Newburgh. And then we have a couple actually in the Napa area of California, and San Pablo, Costa Rica. And a couple of exciting things that we have going on too is a potential network in Nigeria, in Abuja city, or possibly Lagos. So we're working with some organizers there. There's some difficulties, of course, in the developing world. So logistically, it's a little bit longer term deployment. And then we have another exciting deployment happening in the Los Mochis area of Mexico. And actually the organizer there is going to be going down here next week, or actually this week, I think he's leaving, and setting up some equipment and a small pilot program. And then we'll be working to deploy out further here in the next couple of weeks. So really getting boots on the ground and starting to build out beyond just our pilot program in Clatskanie, Oregon.
I can go next. So I've been helping Deborah with the with the Althea Hoods program, and I just wanted to add with that, it tends to be it's a good amount of work setting up a local network. It's not just that you buy a box and plug it in on your shelf or something that magically creates internet. You're actually setting a network. You're aiming antennas at each other. It's very much like she said, boots on the ground kind of thing. So with Althea Hoods, we kind of have a threshold where people are trying to sign people up in a certain neighborhood and get to a number. We have, most of them are set at 100 right now. So with 100 pre-registrations, there's the demand there, and so that gives a little bit of extra assurance that if you build the network, people are going to want to use it. So that's the goal with that. But like Deborah said, some of the deployments, they're not doing Althea Hoods. In the developing world, especially, it's not as easy to do. So anyway, the other stuff I've been working on is I've been doing also a lot of technical work as well, and I've mostly been working on this is pretty boring stuff, but it's like bridge code from Ether to XDAI. And XDAI is a side chain of Ethereum, which is much faster. And lately with the Ethereum price increases, it's gotten a lot slower and more expensive to do transactions on Ethereum. And we had this kind of respite from high transaction fees due to the bear market in Ether, but now it's, that's kind of ending. So we definitely have increased urgency to get over onto another chain. And so XDAI is going to be that chain in the short term. In the long term, we're going to set up a Cosmos zone. I think we spoke about that before. And that is also a faster blockchain. But I've been working on this code to basically, when you put Ether in your router, so people using Althea on the ground, and for instance, in Classic and Deborah's community, they'll buy Ether from Coinbase. It's easy to buy Ether on Coinbase. It's very widely used, well-supported cryptocurrency. So it's great for exchanging fiat. But what the bridge code is doing that I've been working on is basically you send the Ether into your router and then it automatically gets turned into XDAI, which is XDAI is also it's a stable coin. So it's the same value of the dollar. So it gets turned to XDAI, it gets turned to DAI first, and then it gets sent over a bridge on the XDAI chain. And so that's a lot what I've been doing. I've also been experimenting with setting up a Cosmos zone and starting to get that ready, because Cosmos is an even faster kind of blockchain platform that we will be switching to after XDAI. So that's what I've been up to.
Cool. So first of all, I would like to take a moment to encourage everyone. I think Jehan and Deborah don't necessarily want to brag, but go to althea.org and actually take a look at the Althea Hoods pages. You'll see them on the top bar. It's really cool. They did a great job with it. So I mostly work on firmware stuff, and I've been trying to improve the stability, security, operations of the Althea routers. If you take a look at my most recent blog post on blog.althea.org, you'll see that we've achieved a very good level of traffic performance. So mostly what I'm working on at this point is the reliability of various payment functions and the fixing obscure crashes. For example, last night we had 2 routers crash overnight from an issue that there's a comment in the code where I thought that an issue that might exist there from 9 months ago. So we're dealing with issues that come up in like several hundred router months. There's several hundred months of operating routers because there's 30-ish active devices for these to become real issues. On the other hand, for an ISP, the sort of reliability you need is one misoperation in years, perhaps even dozens of years. So we're at, once again, from my last blog post, we're at approximately 99.7% uptime, which is about 30 minutes of downtime a week. And I have a very strong focus on getting that number up. In this past week, we're at 99.8 right now. Because crash last night did recover eventually. It's still downtime though, and I try to grade myself harshly on that. Other than that, we're coming out with Beta 5, which includes some cool new features, including graphs of bandwidth usage and estimated time until depletion of the funds you have in the router. So I encourage people to play around with that if they have something to flash. And in general, oh yeah, that's what I wanted to talk about. So the increased ETH prices, we've actually been handling that very well as far as pure code. Payments still flow, everything still works, but we target 5% payments and we adjust. We target 5% fees and we adjust automatically to achieve that. Meaning that at peak times, we've been dealing with $3 payments because the 5% fee vaulted in dollars. And even those would take quite a while to get in. I've been very happy with how well the system has performed as far as keeping track of these and not completely flipping out. But it has provided me with a wealth of little bugs to fix and changes to make as far as making a system that is very resilient even to what seems like a horrendously unreliable blockchain. So it's actually been informative. That being said, we are trying to move to something that's a little bit faster, just to take the edge off. But users will, for the for the foreseeable future, we'll be depositing in ETH just because that's by far the easiest to get. And once it's in the router, we can transform it ourselves. So yeah, I think it's time to move on to some of the questions we had.
Yeah, that's great. We got questions from everyone in the sign up sheet. Also, if you have any other questions, feel free to pop them in the chat and we can answer those. Our first question is, can you explain more about the network and its business use case? And this goes to Jehan.
Cool. Yeah, so business use case. So I guess it depends on what your perspective is, I guess, of what you want to accomplish. But the overall goal of Althea is to kind of make the market for bandwidth and internet connectivity more fluid and more efficient, and also let more people participate in it. So, and by letting more people participate in it, that's going to accomplish the making it more fluid, more efficient. So, basically, as you know, it lets routers pay each other for bandwidth. So if somebody has an antenna on their house or their building, their commercial building, whatever the building might be, or even on a tower or something on their property somewhere, with Althea, they can tap into a network and they can provide services to that network. And they can earn money doing that. So previously, up to now, any ISPs, and I'll focus on wireless ISPs especially because that's the kind of equipment that Althea uses, radio equipment for the most part. But you have a network of devices that are all owned by one company, and that does have some advantages because there's a single point of responsibility and there are people to maintain and stuff like that. But being that it's all the network is owned by one company, it means that the network is basically centrally planned, and so there are downsides to central planning, and so one of the downsides of central planning is that the planner needs to have complete information about where there's more demand in the network, where there needs to be more capacity. It's kind of on the planner to make sure that that the network gets built out in the places that it needs to be and stuff like that, and it can work in a lot of scenarios, but then also in a lot of scenarios having something that's a market-based system instead of a centrally planned system is more efficient. So with Althea, that's what we're trying to do to make internet networks, ISP networks, more efficient. So with Althea, you can have somebody who's going around and finding places the network could be improved, finding places where it would be more efficient for the network to set up a link somewhere, and they set that link up, and then it's going to be carrying traffic, and they'll be earning more money. So it provides this incentive to improve the network. As far as a business use case, let's see if you're, if you're maybe that question is more around like if you have an existing business and what's the use case there. So I think for an existing business, depends on what kind of business it is, but let's say you have a business like Deborah's computer shop in Klatskanai, you can get a high bandwidth internet connection there. And Althea lets you sell that internet connection into a network, provided that there's an Althea network there. And so, having an Althea network lets you take advantage of a market where people are looking to buy an asset that you might have, which might be roof space, might be a high bandwidth connection to the internet. And then also another business use case, let's say you're in a community and you're known as somebody who is good at fixing computers and good at doing that kind of thing. You might be a good Althea subnet organizer. And so subnet organizer isn't paid for the bandwidth. The subnet organizer is paid a fixed monthly fee by every router on the network, and that's for providing support and that kind of thing. So that's another business use case where that lets you kind of go around, help people. If you like to help people, you like to fix people's computers and stuff like that. That lets you go around and help people and not necessarily and earn money doing that, and not necessarily have the requirement that you've got to come in with a big capital investment on bandwidth and infrastructure. So that's another business use. We try to kind of split things out so that everybody can do what they're best at in the market, and yet it also works efficiently.
Awesome.
I think you're muted, Liz.
Sorry about that. I've got two devices going on. So going to our next question, how can someone get started, and what are the benefits of being an Althea hood? And this is for Deborah.
Yeah, thanks, Liz. So when we think about getting started with setting up an Althea network, I think it's really important to look at the geographical area. It's all about finding a good fit to start an Althea network. So a lot of times we find that people are thinking about it in maybe more of a overarching sense, like, maybe getting meetups or looking for enthusiasts in a larger area. But networks are set up as infrastructure in a smaller geographical area. So it makes most sense to identify something that an area that, one, maybe needs good internet, there's a business case for it, there is enough population there, or it makes sense from a business side of sense. And then also geographically, it looks like you could probably locate some equipment and set up a network there that would make sense. So one of the ways that is useful to do that is to use Google Earth. Google Earth is a free program that you can get, and you can locate pretend towers using pins there and calculate a view shed. And what that does is it tells you, what you can see from a sector antenna potentially in that area. So you can kind of set up a pretend network in there and at least get an idea of whether or not it's going to physically make sense to set up a wireless infrastructure there. And once you have that area in mind and some idea of what the business landscape looks like, as far as, is there a need, what are people currently paying for? A lot of times we have people come to us who want to set up an Althea network because their service themselves is very poor. So they have an awareness that there is a need currently for another provider in that area, or it's very monopolistic. And there's only one choice currently, and people are unhappy with the service. For the most part, people are going to be looking for cheaper prices or faster internet, and our Agile network configuration can help with that. But it's also about service too, and having a local choice also can be very competitive. So once you sort of have this area in mind, that's when we would encourage you to get a hold of us. Email, we're on Discord, or fill out the organizer form on the website, and then we can help you both from the logistics side of things, finding backhaul sources, working with local business partners in the area, and then also we can start to look at your marketing as far as like Althea hoods and getting that site set up for you and your Facebook site, and help you with the marketing to get people on the ground excited about it and pre-committed.
Awesome. So our next question that came from our signups is for Justin, and that is about router devices. And all my notes say is router devices. So someone wants Justin to talk.
Don't worry, I'm great with dealing with vague questions. Most of the bug reports I get are the internet doesn't work, and I have to try and figure out what that means. Anyways, so Althea has an approach. So first of all, I'm going to start with a little bit of context. Althea's design approach is to rely on point-to-point, long-distance wireless antennas. That's why Deborah was talking about view sheds, because these are line-of-sight antennas. So anywhere you can see, you can get a lot of bandwidth to with very cheap devices, well under $100. They're reliable. They're commodities. And so the way Althea is designed is that we take commodity point-to-point wireless gear that used by any wireless ISP, and then we reprogram the Wi-Fi router attached to this wireless gear. And that gives us a platform to work with where we have a lot of flexibility with what we do with the device, which is part of what's let us advance so fast compared to, say, a platform trying to use Android phones, which has issues programming them because Android doesn't want to let you do everything, because it'd be horrible if an app could take over your phone. And the dedicated antennas, of course, means that we can achieve high speed and things like performance parity with traditional internet. So yeah, with that sort of out of the way, I'll go ahead and mention the state of the art in router devices, which is actually fairly straightforward. We select, we have 4 devices that we really suggest people use, and they offer a variety of sort of so there's in specific situations. So for example, this right here is a GL iNet B1300. They're a company, they're a Chinese company that's just recently sort of expanded it into the United States. This is about $90 if you buy one at a time, and it is of similar quality. In fact, its Wi-Fi antennas are almost exactly as good or bad, depending on your opinion, as the one that Comcast is handing out these days, despite being significantly cheaper in unit cost. So the primary limit to the speed of an Althea device is the CPU because of the encryption we do on the traffic. So this one will get 150 megabits in ideal lab conditions, closer to a little over 100 in production. So we suggest this for most people because people are cost conscious, and this is definitely the right mix between performance and everything else. And we suggest, or give me a second, I need to go and grab my toolkit. There we go. Sorry, I just have a pile of routers over in the corner, off camera, of course. So this is our high-end option, and by high-end I mean $160. And if you say that isn't all that expensive compared to what you're seeing at Best Buy, yes, that's the goal. We only suggest devices that provide really good performance per dollar. As somebody who's spent a good part of the last year trying out random Wi-Fi routers, I know the market fairly well now. And so this is pretty much the best you get until you have to have something with a fan. It gets about 500 megabits per second. It's huge, but its Wi-Fi is good enough to cover all of Deborah's farm, so that makes her happy. Really, after those devices, you get into something with a fan, so like a mini PC or a rack-mounted server, and those can route seed to having a fan to cool the CPU. You can push as much bandwidth as you like. Like a stock modern server can do 10 gigabit easy. If you want to go crazy, you can do 100. It's not really a problem. But of course, if you're putting something in somebody's house and you intend it to be a Wi-Fi router, it's going to get shoved in a cabinet and has to deal with no airflow and stuff like that. So fans are not an option for that situation. So I feel like that's really a summary of the state of the art for Althea routers right now. We're pretty happy with the selection and the price to performance ratio. Obviously, we could sit down and try and build our own device, which would achieve, gigabit, no fan, lots of ports, perhaps even built-in long-range antennas. But the fact of the matter is that cost is dominated by manufacturing scale in a bit. So the reason we can keep the average user install down to well under $200 is because we're using commodity devices, and we're unlikely to change that until we're operating at such a scale that we can get the same commodity prices.
Great. So that's all about routers. And again, if you are watching out there, feel free to pop any questions in the chat. It's pretty quiet out there today, which is fine, but you feel free to ask us about anything that we've talked about or things that we haven't brought up. Our next question that we got was around legal issues. And just to clarify, we are not any of us lawyers on this call. So this is going to cover anecdotal stuff that Althea has faced in the existing deployments. And this is, I think, Jehan and Deborah are going to take on this question.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of different things to cover. Generally, legal issues are not a huge factor in the United States, at least. In a lot of other countries, they're also not a huge factor. But I think the first legal issue is, and this is actually not even legal, it's more operational, but if you're using, so an Althea network needs at least one gateway, which is, you know, a connection to the broader internet. And technically, for the Althea network, any Althea network, doesn't matter how many gateways there are. There can be many gateways. You can have a network where it's just, the gateways are just routers in people's homes, which are running off of their home connection. And actually, I volunteered for several years with a mesh network in Oakland where that is exactly how it was backhauled. And it works fine technically. However, the issue is that a home connection is not meant to be used to supply a connection to other people. So if you're getting 100 megabits at your home, that same 100 megabits has been sold to at least 20 other people. And the reason that you will probably see 100 megabits still on speed test that nobody actually uses it all at the same time, so it works out. However, due to the fact that it is oversold like that, and that's a good, actually a decent way to do it, there's nothing wrong with that in my opinion, they will attach to the contract, you're not allowed to share it. And that's generally the case for most ISPs, although some don't have that in there and they're okay with it. That's generally when they're more okay with it right after they've built new network infrastructure and it's way over capacity for what they actually need. So as they got to tighten down, they're not as okay with it. So if you're using a home internet connection to backhaul Althea, there could be legal issues there. Not legal issues, I guess they would just cut off your service. But I felt like people should know about that because it is sort of in that same ballpark. They might just say your contract is terminated, maybe charge you some kind of cancellation fee if that's part of it. Even if it wasn't legal, they could also throttle you, stuff like that. So I wanted to mention it.
Great.
I was going to talk a little bit about, a lot of people ask us about the FCC in the United States and complying in the United States with those laws, and wanted to give a little bit more clarity on that. So with an Althea network, there's an exit node that's in a data center outside of the sort of physical area of the network, where that's where the traffic's actually, you know, peering with the rest of the internet. And so this is the entity, which in many cases is going to be us, probably in most cases, that will have responsibility of any anti-piracy and DMCA type notices. And as far as we can tell, and what the FCC has indicated to us, is that they would also, this entity would also bear the responsibility for filling out the one form that they do require, which is the 477 form. And essentially what the 477 form is supposed to do is to give the FCC an idea of how many people are getting broadband service. So they can make their maps, they can see, you know, where the areas are that maybe need services, and develop federal programs for that. So they're really just mostly interested that you are reporting and that you're not double reporting. So with the networks that we have, we'll have some idea of the census blocks that they're serving, and work with the FCC to fill out the form 477 for the networks that we have in the United States.
Wait. Sorry. Sorry. I was on mute myself. So anyway, I also want to mention about that. So our this is also not exactly legal, but so our exit nodes, we run them, and we wish that there was a way to have it be decentralized, and have it be like anybody can run an exit node, that kind of thing. That would actually be great for us, because it would give us the ability to have people more engaged. It would be a good business move for us not to run them. However, the exit node can see your browsing history. So we can't just let random people run them, because who knows, if you're just going to some random server you don't know who it is, they might be hoovering up that data, selling it, doing something bad with it. So so we run them. We also don't in the US, which is our active, our active exit nodes right now are in the US, and we don't keep any logs on those. And we're also not required to keep any logs in the US, and that's our policy, is not to keep any logs. So In other countries, we talked to some folks from Australia yesterday. Other countries, there are, unfortunately, I personally don't agree with them, but there are more requirements on logging. A lot of that stuff can also, so it can be kind of a lot to deal with for somebody who might be running a gateway or might be running a subnet organization and stuff. And that's another thing we can do, or whoever's running the exit nodes can do, is to deal with that legal compliance stuff. And so that's a way that the structure of Althea is also helpful to people on the ground, is that they can kind of they don't have to deal with all the legal requirements that might be in place. And then the way that works from kind of a trust perspective, you might be saying like, hey, how is that decentralized if Althea is running all the exit nodes? It's a very good point. But the fact is that an end user can configure a custom exit node to use. And basically the trust relationship that exists is that the end user does not have to trust the people on the ground. They don't have to trust their neighbor. That allows the most efficient, most cost-effective path for bandwidth to be used. And you don't have to worry about trusting people who are carrying your traffic. The end user does trust the exit node. So either they trust their own exit node they set up, maybe they trust a different exit node their friends set up or something. In most default cases, the end user is not even thinking about that because they're just a normal person trying to use the internet, and then they use the LTE exit nodes. So that's kind of how it works.
Great. So kind of in that same vein, we got a question around, there's sort of been a lot of articles and a few things out there that in several locales in the United States, they are making community internet illegal at the local level. So there's just been some reporting about this. And the question is, how does this affect Althea, and are these regulations enforceable? And I think this goes to Justin, but anyone can answer that.
Yeah, so I'll go ahead and take some of this. First of all, some of the headlines you see are misleading because they say community internet. And while that's not necessarily the wrong use of the term, they could be a little bit more specific. Mainly, these laws are about banning municipal internet, so as in city, state, county-owned networks from selling to end customers. Notice that I said selling to end customers. Almost none of them ban state or county or city-owned networks from selling to other ISPs, because often ISPs rely on structure that may be owned by the government. They just don't want the government selling it or providing it in any way directly to taxpayers, because that would be a threat to their business. So while these laws are not in the best interest of most Americans, probably, they are not specifically a problem for Althea. We've even had some interest from municipal networks about using Althea as a way to deliver bandwidth to the end customer because they already have municipal backhaul networks that they would otherwise be barred from selling to normal consumers. But with Althea, they wouldn't necessarily be selling it to one ISP who would then have a monopoly on all the customers they hooked up using that network. They would be selling it into a system which is automatically competitive and anyone may use. So it's not really a problem for Althea. It's probably states and cities that are passing laws like that, but I will refrain from further commenting in that vein. Now let's talk about something a little bit more exciting, at least to me. Could they technically block you from doing this? And the answer is that's actually very difficult. Althea devices, even though you may not be allowed due to terms of the contract or local laws or whatever from selling an internet connection to sell an internet connection, Althea devices do not know, nor do they care. And they will punch through firewalls or other things and are rather hard to find on a network. I mean, if you look for specific, so the most reliable way to figure out if somebody's running Althea on a connection is to look for the Althea exit servers and connections to them. So if you were to use non-standard exit servers, you'd have a pretty hard time. WireGuard's an anonymous protocol, like anything specific. If we wanted to hide it as TCP, we could do that too. But But my speculations aside, whether or not it's actually possible to enforce any rules against selling bandwidth with Althea, I don't think it would be very easy. But I think that answers the question from both sides.
I also want to just mention, I'm going off on Justin's thing here. I don't know if this is necessarily answering the question, but I want to mention that in the case that you're in an authoritarian country, things are more difficult. If you're in a country that heavily regulates any communication, Althea doesn't necessarily help that much. So I want to be upfront about that. And so the scenario I'm thinking about is, I think in the long run it could, and that's actually one of the reasons that I think we all kind of started working on this project, was one of the reasons. But in the short run, it's a risky endeavor. So let's say you're in China and they don't allow you to have connections that are not going through the Great Firewall of China. So you might say, hey, well, if you have an Althea network and be a cyberpunk, and they can't stop that. But the thing is, like, if they see an antenna on your house, they might ask some questions about that. And it really comes down to, you know, what the enforcement is like. But I wouldn't advise somebody to go around setting up antennas in China. I don't think that would necessarily end well. And then also the other thing is that Althea needs a connection to the internet, obviously, to provide internet service. And frankly, I mean, if you did it with the blessing of the Chinese government, then maybe the backhaul for Althea could be going through the Great Firewall, and they wouldn't even have a problem with that. But if you wanted to do it to kind of evade whatever communication controls were going on in that country, they would still be able to see the physical infrastructure. Now, I do think in the long run, if Althea becomes a widespread system, so let's say in China, they also forbid selling drugs, but people, and they forbid selling drugs in most places in the world, but people still do it. So, I mean, I think that having an economic incentive to where you can easily just sell bandwidth will enable, in the long run, kind of a whole new, maybe I shouldn't be saying this, I don't know, but will enable a whole new kind of a class of badass renegade bandwidth dealers, because you can hide antennas, but by itself, you know, you probably don't want to, unless you really know what you're doing, get into that kind of thing if it's illegal where you are. So, yeah.
Great.
Badass renegade bandwidth dealers, the quote that started it all.
I did also want to just call attention to what Justin was talking about. There is, I think, a lot of synergy between our networks and working together with your municipality, because oftentimes you will find where you're living in an area where they would like to have better access, but cities and electrical co-ops or whatever, they're not experienced in running networks, and so they're usually more than happy to work with you to potentially bring in backhaul, or if they have you know, an intranet between their city hall buildings or whatever to open that up to use. So I think there's a lot of creative things that you can do working together with your, you know, whether it's the county or municipality or whatever, to get points of backhaul.
Great. Great. And I've now been inspired to write some more dystopian fiction where characters are selling their broadband to each other. The black market. It's a great idea. So we don't have too many more questions. We've got about 5 minutes left on this call. And for that, we're going to talk about setting up a network. And if you guys can all, this was sort of the last question we got in. And so if you guys can all touch on, we talked about it a little in the beginning, but yeah, just setting up a network, how to do that.
Yeah, so I'm going to try to pull up here. Maybe Jehan, you could start an image that sort of indicates what a gateway location would look like, because most of where you're going to start with the network is that backhaul fiber connection, and then broadcasting that out. So Jehan, if you kind of wanted to go through that, or Justin, and I'm going to look for an image so that we can maybe reference.
Yeah, sure. Well, you know, a gateway is, like we were saying, it's certainly possible to have many gateways, but in general, for the reliability, you're going to want to have, if you're starting a network, you're going to have one main gateway you're using. And it'll look a lot like trying to start a wireless ISP. So basically, you need a building that has access to fiber. That's not as hard to find as you might think, even if there's generally no fiber available in the area. A lot of times commercial buildings will have that access. And then also you'll need an antenna to get it out to your first customers. And so if you're starting out your network, it's definitely best if you talk to Deborah first, and she will help you plan that for your area, and price out the equipment and everything, and figure out how many people you need to break even on that first gateway. But yeah, it's a generally a set of equipment that's, a few $100s, and you'll have it on a pole, a mast, and that will let you get to your first customers. And I'll let Deborah take it from here, because that's really
Yeah. Can you guys hear me? Am I muted?
You're fine.
Okay. Yeah. So this is basically the gateway location, and so down below you're going to have your Althea router, and then it's connected to these antennas that are broadcasting out into the community. So these are sector antennas. These rectangular ones are 2.4 gigahertz, and these orange-shaped antennas are 5 gigahertz. And those are both unlicensed bands, and they have some properties that work better in different types of environments. But these generally can handle, multiple connections. It's called a point-to-multi-point configuration. So these can handle maybe 25 up to 40, maybe pushing it, connections, and still not suffer any kind of performance degradation. So essentially, these antennas are going to be bridged with what's called the CPE, or the customer premises equipment, on someone's home. Or in the case of the relay, they're bridged to the relay antenna, and then from the relay antenna, another sector pointing out. So I was going to show you what that looks like as well. So this is a relay antenna. So this big dish here, and you can see this is very common too with the larger equipment. You'll have a separate actual radio, and then this piece here is the actual antenna. It's and this is just going to be bridged, a simple wireless bridge with that other sector antenna at the gateway location. And then these are all plugged into an Althea and a router at the person's home. And then these are sector antennas pointing out into different areas. And then this particular person, I think, has 5 or 6 clients on there at the moment, but they could take, many more as well as the network itself grows. And so as the network grows, then you would just be placing the customer premises equipment on the user's home, and pointing it and lining it at these sector antennas, and plugging in the Althea router. That's pretty much as simple as it is. And I never remember how to stop screen sharing. It's not. There we go. Okay. Yeah.
Great. Justin or Jehan, do you want to talk more about setting up a network? Anything to add?
I would add that you should talk to Deborah. Yeah.
Yeah, Deborah is the expert at setting up networks, finding resaleable backhauls, and really working on connecting users and how to make those line of sight links work. In fact, I think Deborah makes weird, nearly impossible non-line of sight links more often than she makes line of sight links. So you should definitely talk to her about it.
Awesome. And I did put in the chat, I put a link to our Get Involved page, which has a link to the sign up contact form. So if you want to get involved, if you want to be an organizer and set up a network, yeah, just let us know. And I think that's all our questions. And we're like right on time, which is amazing. And any last words? We can go down the line, starting with Justin, and you can last words signing off before we go. Justin, Jehan, and then Deborah.
Okay, see y'all next week. Hopefully I will come back with a report of 99.99% uptime in our test networks. Here's to hoping.
Bye-bye.
I also wanted to let y'all know that Jehan's going to be in Berlin, I believe in June. Was it the 10th and 11th? Is that correct?
No, it's the 13th and 14th.
For interchain conversations. So if you're all in Europe. And Justin, you're going to be at the North American Network Operators Group Conference in Washington, D.C. And that maybe is the 10th and 11th of June. Is that right?
Yeah, it starts on the 9th, but it's mostly the 10th and 11th.
Great. Awesome, guys. So it's been great. This chat will be up online for everyone to share again, and we will be back in June with another community call. And also we've started doing technical calls so that with Justin and Jehan, and those will be happening in another week or 2 weeks. We're trying to figure out the schedule for when to have those regularly. So great. Thank you for joining us and watching, and we'll see you next time. Bye, everyone.